You said in your debate with Joe Biggs, this is your quote, there's 40,000 homicides by guns every single year. Do you still stand by that quote?
I don't believe I said that. If I did, I misspoke. I believe it's around 10 to 12,000 homicides per year and about 20,000 suicides.
That's 3 times less than the flu. Do you think that we have a gun violence epidemic in this country? The flu kills 30,000 people a year.
Okay, and we also have flu shots. I don't understand what the point is.
Well, I'm just saying, if there's 10,000 homicides by guns each and every year.
Okay, and 20,000 suicides.
Mostly perpetrated by gang members.
Okay, and 20,000 suicides that aren't generally perpetrated by gang members.
Yeah, but they use it because the gun's there. They can hang themselves. We don't even top the top 10 for suicides.
Yeah, what you just said was very true. They use it because it's there. Having a firearm in the home makes you more likely to kill yourself with it just by virtue of
That's not going to stop them from committing suicide.
But it does. The numbers bear that out. If you have a firearm in the home,
the top 10, Japan is number 7 for suicides per 100,000. We don't even, and they hang themselves in forests out there. We don't even top the top 10 in suicides per 100,000 in this country.
That's good. I'm not trying to make top 10 lists for how many people kill themselves in the U.S. Just
right,
because we're not on the worst part of the list doesn't.
There isn't going to stop them from killing themselves.
But it does. It's basic human psychology. If you were to put a button next to a person's desk and they could push it to kill themselves, a lot more people would probably do it when they're having a bad day as well.
I would say that probably some people would.
So being able to pull the trigger on a gun is much easier than tying a rope up and hanging yourself.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that we should hinder people who are okay with guns. The vast majority, go ahead.
When I was growing up, there were no gun laws that we have today. And when I turned 15, they gave me my first rifle. No one ever taught me how to use it or told me not to or how to or anything. I went out and I used my rifle. I killed a squirrel or something in a tree. And yet you didn't have the gun, the
mass
type
shootings,
of people,
nothing.
Mass shooting and all that's happening then. And guns was everywhere when I was growing up. What's the difference between then and now?
There's a lot of differences between then and now. I mean, economic disparity, the differences between.
Well, we were poor. I grew up in a house that had a tin rooftop.
Sure,
have you ever used the bathroom outside?
Yeah.
My toilet was outside.
Okay.
And so that's poor, right?
I don't know. It depends.
No, that would be considered poor if your toilet is made outside.
If you live in I've been on farms where they have like outhouses and stuff. I wouldn't consider them poor, but sure.
But the thing about it, we didn't have the money that people have today. Why did we see this type of stuff happening then? It was very, very rare. What's the difference between then and now?
That's a very complicated question.
You don't know the answer to that?
There's differences in the structures of families. There's differences in cultural attitudes towards firearms. There's probably differences in the amount of gangs that are present. There's differences in the in the structures of cities, access to guns, access to drugs, access to people that are likely to kill each other over either of these things. There's a ton of differences between then and now.
What do you say the difference between then and now?
I would say that there's, I have theories. I don't have any statistics to back this up as solid fact. I have theories that, for instance, the white Americans, non-Hispanics, they were at 5%, I think, of children born out of wedlock. Today we're at 30%. Black Americans went from 22%. Today they're at 73%. Hispanic Americans upticked as well. We have a massive influx of changing demographics since the 1950s. So I think that the sense of community, the sense of consistency, the sense of technology, there's all sorts of things. You have children who were prescribed with psychotropic multi-class drugs were only, I think, 2% back in the 1950s versus today where it's almost a quarter of all children who are prescribed with psychotropic drugs, Adderall, because their parents aren't willing to just deal with their energy that these kids have and shove an iPad in their face. I think there's a big, huge cultural change, and these are the things that I would like to target. I would like to target the hive that is creating these things like mass shooters and things like that. Because if you look in the 1950s, there was no mass shootings. We had the same handguns with the same amount of ammunition in the magazines, and people weren't walking into schools shooting each other. 90% of all the mass shootings that happened in this country are perpetrated with handguns. We had the same. I have a 1911 from that era that works better than my Beretta PX4 Storm that I just bought like 2 weeks ago. Amazing. So I think that I think we have to target those things. I think we have to focus on the cultural decline and lots of different things.
Would you agree to that?
Yeah, of course. I just don't see why it can't be multifaceted. I think there are absolutely problems that we have today in regards to people getting along with each other, in terms of the happiness levels that people experience, in terms of our disconnectedness from society. You see a lot of people that are discontent with that. And yeah, definitely you can target things like that. You can also find ways to keep people from hurting themselves in the
When I was
meantime.
growing up, the differences between then and now is that they had families. Men and women got married, they raised their kids, they set a good example.
Sure.
It was unheard of for black on black violence or for whatever reason. And black people now, most don't have more values. They don't have families. They don't have a sense of self-control. And that's the reason that the gun issues happening right now. Because if they had values, if they had parents, if they had love in their hearts, they wouldn't be killing each other. Would you agree to that?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Generally.
So why not change that? Rebuild families, rebuild men, rebuild families, teach morality by example.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
end the gun
that's,
thing. Why take away the innocent people's guns and not change the hearts and minds of the people?
again, you can do both.
But
I
you wouldn't
acknowledge
need to
that.
do the second one if you had the more values in order. You just need to do one. Rebuild families so that these kids would see the right thing to do.
When you talk about like rebuilding families, this is like a very complicated, again, a multifaceted. You're talking about an intersection between the criminal justice system, because people that are locked up in jail have a much higher chance of committing violent acts in the future or having their life go awry in the future. You're talking about access to wealth. People that are wealthier tend to get married earlier. You're talking about other forms of access to wealth. Wealthier people tend to be able to afford contraception or abortion or have more means
But
of
you don't
recreation.
need all that if you're
No,
married.
these are all but I'm saying like marriage isn't something that people just randomly decide to do. There are a lot of conditions that will predict whether somebody will
But
get
they don't
married.
need to have children until they get married. If they
Yeah,
don't
but
get
people
married,
generally
they
don't have children
children.
out of wedlock because they need to. It's usually because it's an accident or because of lack
No,
of
not
other
an
stuff to do.
accident.
I would
Like a
say
bad-
that there's a big cultural aspect to it nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Like
you
a-
look at the gang members, this is the gang members per 100,000 people by race in America. And you can see that the black and Hispanic are at 1,159 per 100,000, Hispanics at 1,110 per 100,000, and the white non-Hispanic are at 78.97 per 100,000, and Asian is like negligible. When you look at the statistics, the East Asians, like the Chinese, they're just like trying to learn piano, violin, and I mean, so there's a huge cultural aspect that I think that goes, and I think that a lot of this is perpetrated by Hollywood. Like as far as the black community, I was talking to Uncle Hotep, right? And he said, and he was talking about how Hollywood, they prop up blacks being in gangs and selling drugs and, you know, stealing cars and all sorts of different things. I think that's a big issue. Like we should not be propping that up on a pedestal and having that be like something to strive to later on in life. See, different cultures, like the Asians, they don't have, like they're not shunned in their little community or their little group at school for talking, you know, articulately or something like that. But I know that I've talked to black Americans and they say that they're shunned for talking like a white guy or something
they
like
are.
that.
Sure.
So these are big issues that I think that
I mean, if you're going to argue for greater representation of minorities in media, I absolutely 100% will get on board with that. I think
Oh
that's
my
an
God, here we
absolutely.
go with the
I mean, what you just said, I
virtue
100%
signaling.
agree.
Jesus
Representation of minorities in
yeah.
media is very important. If your only role models in media are gangsters or something like that,
I think
then yeah,
that
you're
those
probably.
things we should be saying that that's a bad thing. In
Sure,
my
So,
personal
I generally agree with that. Also, keep in mind that media doesn't just tell us, you know, what to do. In some ways, media is a reflection of who we are. It's not like everybody in the country was chill, and then all of a sudden the media just created these horrible images for people to strive to or aspire to. It's more like those tend to be a reflection of you know, the times, you know, in and of themselves. You know, when you look at a lot of people point to things like black culture and why don't they trust the cops or why not? Well, because a lot of them got the shit kicked out of them by the cops in the
was
early
their fault,
1900s through not all the time.
No, it was their
When you're
fault.
talking about
They
like
were thugs.
when you're talking about like pre-segregation
No,
and whatnot.
and that's a lie too. That was made up.
Okay.
Really,
well,
that was made up.
I'm
I was
not able
there.
to. I don't.
That was made up.
Didn't you live under
Yeah, I
Jim
was
Crow?
there. That's right.
And
I grew up under Jim Crow
And you could
law.
walk into a
And
school
what-
with white children
what they
and
have-
learn from the same teachers.
I never
and-
wanted to.
Why not?
I was satisfied
How were
with
the
the teacher.
black
You were
I had.
How were
satisfied
the
with your
black
shittier
families
schools,
back
with your
then,
worst
Jesse?
teachers, and your less funding available
I'm
to
sorry?
you? You were satisfied with the worst institutions available to you that
We
didn't
didn't
have
have
the same
all that. It
funding?
wasn't that way.
Why
They've been
would- I mean,
lying to you, I'm telling you.